The argument that the White House and task force have not been transparent, in my mind, is a faux argument from the minority leader. He's really trying to let career regulators at agencies like the CDC bog down the economy, again with bureaucratic hurdles. I would probably know that as well as any senator here, because I spent 12 years ago fighting to reform health care. It's related agencies that bog the system down, a system that gives us a health care cost that is double that of any other across the country. We'll get back to that. 80 senators on both sides of the aisle weighed in on that before the coronavirus raised its ugly head. The White House and task force have been beyond transparent in the midst of this outbreak, indeed holding unprecedented amount of daily press briefings and allowing for a free flow of information that has been central to the White House's reopening efforts. This is not about transparency. The White House is always going to be in favor of transparency. The president comes from a world of entrepreneurs where we embrace it in competition. This is about the minority leader trying to use the bureaucracy at the CDC to bog down the economy. We have got to, from this point forward, make sure that we adhere to everything the healthcare experts have told us, but we've got to be able to do a couple things at once, and that means a smart restart to the economy. The CDC and other health agencies were targets of the White House deregulation efforts from day one. They were the most challenging regulatory agencies to rein in. The Democrats and bureaucrats who are content with the status quo have been blocking efforts to deregulate since President Trump took office. How we can do that when decades have brought us to the point with the healthcare system in general doesn't make sense to a Main Street entrepreneur like me that has found that a different dynamic works. The CDC, for example, was in the driver's seat during the initial stages of the outbreak. Their missteps on testing forced us to take a one-size-fits-all approach, which didn't make sense to many of us. We could have handled this in a way that's not putting us now on the precipice of an even greater calamity. The inability to conduct early and wide testing in the U.S., caused by the CDC's and FDA's overly prescriptive stodginess, prolonged the testing process in the early stages when it should have been expedited. The result has been that one-size-fits-all that we're contending with currently. We now lead the world in testing, thanks to the White House's efforts to fight off the regulatory swamp at the CDC and fix the testing problems caused by regulators. I submitted to the record yesterday in that over 2-hour briefing with the healthcare experts that timeline, refer to it. It happened from late January through early March. Senator Schumer wants to release the CDC's version of the reopening guidance, but the White House and senior health officials have rejected the initial CDC recommendations in that version because the recommendations were overly prescriptive, infringed upon religious rights, and risked further damaging the economy. Are we really going to let the CDC shutter the economy a second time, like they did with testing, by dictating overly prescriptive guidelines? President Trump's deregulatory agenda has proven to be an immediate success because we have gone from initially mired in bureaucratic hurdles to leading the world in testing and successfully flattening the curve and fighting the virus. Spoke to a CEO of a pharmaceutical company headquartered in Indiana, said the very same thing. They were stymied from the get-go. He, among other pharmaceutical companies, have put together an entrepreneurial effort to tackle this. It's not going to be done by trying to tie their hands. They're close to getting testing to where it's going to work for all of us. I have a business 3 of my 4 kids run. We want to make sure we have testing to make sure that we can bring employees into a healthy environment and take care of customers. All businesses share that concern. The minority leader and Democrats do not want to reopen the economy because I think, frankly, we had the best one I've ever seen in the 37 years I was a CEO of a Main Street company that went from a little company like the minority leader always talks about. We share that common interest. I was disappointed when the PPP did come out that they weren't helped first. We got that fixed. Let's stay focused on that. We keep moving the goalposts for reopening. If we do that, we risk, in economic terms, what's called demand and supply destruction. And there would not be enough federal dollars to remedy that. The White House proactively gave us the appropriate roadmap to get the economy back on track. We should not leave something as important as reopening the country to career regulators at the CDC, an agency that set back our response efforts due to their overly prescriptive approach. U.S. testing exploded once the White House efforts to increase testing, fight off the regulatory bureaucrats when that won out. The same thing will happen with reopening the economy, using the reopening guidance as a roadmap under the president's leadership. I object.